Good evening, everybody. Is everybody able to
All
hear
right,
me?
hi
Oh, sorry.
everybody. So this week we have Chuck, who is going to be presenting. It's okay, I was just going to introduce you, but
Oh, sure.
floor.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Thank you, Dr. Jardine, for asking me to do this. Is everybody able to hear me okay?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Right. All right, great. So we're going to start. I see some names I know, some names I don't. So welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about autism. My name is Chuck Grabowski. I am an ALEC instructor for the state of Rhode Island, Connecticut, and some of Massachusetts. I was on Lincoln Rescue until 2016. I had a back injury and I was forced to medically retire. So on retirement, it was really hard and I didn't know really what I was going to do. So somebody actually called me about the ALEC, becoming an ALEC instructor. ALEC stands for Autism and Law Enforcement Education Coalition. I was really excited to do this. And what makes us unique is that we teach about autism. We are or currently are former first responders, and we also have an autistic person in our immediate family. So my daughter Lillian, she has autism. She's 14 years old. She was diagnosed at age 4, and this training revolves basically around her life. I use her as my example for just about everything. So you're going to learn a lot about how my family functions, how Lily functions. Any questions, please just feel free to yell out. If you type, I might not see it, but yelling out is good. I also am the executive director of a Public Safety Special Needs Coalition. You can check us out online. We bring individuals with special needs in to fire departments, police departments, EMS departments, and we get to know each other before an actual emergency happens. So I think that's really important. And I think after this program tonight, you'll be able to understand a little bit more why that initial meetup without the emergency is so important. So we can get started. So the history of our program, we're about 15, 16 years old. We do our lectures completely free for any department that is interested in having their members trained. We are grant funded by the Autism Society and Bailey's Team for Autism. So we're really happy to have them on our team. It's been, about 16 years old. It was started in Massachusetts by Bill Canada. He was a Westwood fireman, captain, now retired. And what happened was one day somebody came to the firehouse doors and knew Bill had an autistic son and asked him, what happens if first responders meet up with our kids on the street and we're not there? What happens to our kids? A lot of people have seen police interactions and even some fire interactions that just didn't go as well or as planned. So Bill said, I don't know what's going to happen, but what he did was make this program. The Mass Attorney General picked it up, and it's kind of cascaded down to other states. We do travel the country. Some of our instructors have been to international airports, and that's huge because you have people from all over the world that are autistic coming into our country, going state to state, and it's important that the airports understand and treat them accordingly. So what is autism? Well, this is autism to me. This is my family, Lily up front, my wife, Jen, in the background. She is she counsels addiction, drug and alcohol addiction. And me in the background looking like I just came out of Blue's Clues. I wore that shirt unknowingly, took the picture. I went outside and got made fun of by my neighbor, so that was great. Lily does not look like a lot of people say what autism in their mind looks like. Reason being, and a big reason, is because girls and boys are drastically different when it comes to autism. They have a lot harder time diagnosing females with autism because they don't have the typical nuances of what autism looks like. When you think of autism, a lot of people think of that flat facial effect, that non-eye contact, almost like you're not there. Well, girls, on the other hand, especially Lily, she does make some eye contact sometimes, but she always has a smile on her face. She's very interested in other people. She has a ton of empathy, especially for animals. And if she sees something that happens in front of her, whether it be happy or sad, she will have a reaction. A lot of people think when they think of autism that there isn't going to be that reaction. Sometimes there's not. Like I said before, I'm going to talk a lot about her. She's 14 now. And her four-legged support team. This is probably the most important thing to Lily. And in emergency medical services, fire, police, if you were to come to my house, they would be a big part of getting her to get acquainted with you. We use them as tools a lot of the time when she is having a hard time. Sophia on the left, the white dog, she's a rescue. She is now 7 years old. She's the, we call her the animal matriarch. Rocky on the right, he is 2 years old. And Winston and Dexter are both the two cats. A lot of people think, oh, cats, but they actually play a real big part in Liz's life. They all four of them are very understanding of her. And you'll see more pictures as we head out through. This is Lily today, 14 years old, self-described emo. She loves music. She's very musically inclined. She especially loves metal music. She loves horror movies, history. She's a big history buff. If we're watching TV, usually we're going to watch something about history. She loves it. She is in 8th grade, going to 9th grade next year. And school has been extremely hard for her since COVID hit. Before COVID hit, she was in a private school for kids with autism. COVID hit and everybody went virtual. I don't think people understand what the going virtual did to our special needs community and our regular typical kids. It really destroyed them. Lily has not been to school for a complete day since 2020. So a lot of people are really surprised to hear that. But some days she goes to school for an hour. Some days she can tolerate going to school for 3 hours. She's never made it over the 3-hour mark. But just getting her to school is an accomplishment, and we celebrate that every day. She has a lot of hardships when it comes to that. We'll go on more about it. What is autism? Autism, ASD for short. If I say ASD tonight, no, that's what I'm talking about. It appears within the first 3 to 4 years of life. Why is that? A lot of people wonder, why is that? Well, when you're dealing with autism, what you need is to know right up front, if the child is going to meet their growing expectations or their milestones. Lily had a difficult time walking until about a little after age 2. She spoke very well before, and she had a typical what they call STIM, which is a continuous movement, and hers was rocking. She started that very, very young. She would rock wherever she was in her sitting down, standing up when she was able to. So she wasn't meeting a lot of her milestones, and that's when we went and got her evaluated for autism at age 4. This at the bottom says, if you met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. That's by Dr. Stephen Shore. He is a PhD and he is autistic. And what basically, what this means is, if I line up 3 people with autism today, each one of them is an individual, like I or you are an individual. There are going to be similarities because of the autism, but they have their own personalities. It's not, the autism isn't who they are. It's, the disorder they have. So just remember, if you have a call today with somebody with autism, you have a call tomorrow, that call tomorrow is going to be very different. To get an autism diagnosis, you're going to need three major things. First is the social interactions issue. Lily did not socially interact with peers, and she still has difficulty to this day. What happens is, a good example is Lily would sit in the sandbox and she'd look over at the other kids on the other side playing in the sandbox. She would mimic what they were doing, but she would never actually engage and play with them. The next would be a communication or language skill issue. Lily was great with communication, but when you put her in a stressful situation, that communication is going to, it's going to start to regress. She'll, in the beginning, she'll probably answer me in full sentences as the emergency, say this emergency gets going. She's going to start regressing to one-word answers, and then she's going to peak and she's not going to answer at all verbally anymore. Third is going to be a behavior issue, and there's a little asterisk next to behavior. What I want to talk about with behavior is these are not the kids you see in the department store that are upset because they didn't get a toy or something that they want. When you bring an autistic child, and please remember when I say child, autistic child, I also mean adults too. They grow up to be adults and the autism doesn't go away. But what I was saying was when you bring an autistic child into, say, a department store, they handle it very different than a typical individual, say, you or I. When we walk into a department store, we take for granted all the sensory stimulation around us. We walk into the door, the lights hit us, the smells, the sounds, everything that's happening hits us at once. But we have the ability to take piece by piece the lights. We know, okay, halogen lights, the sounds, the registers, the people talking. We're able to process that very easily when we go about our time in whatever store we're in. The problem with autism is they're not able to differentiate the different sensory stimulation in time. So basically they walk in, you have all the sensory stimulation I talked about, and now that is in a 5-gallon bucket. As soon as they walk into the store, it's dumped over their heads. So they now have to scramble and try to differentiate between all the sensory stimulation. They're not able to. If, like anything, you're not able to do something, you become frustrated. They're frustrated because they can't help themselves. Like I said before, the communication becomes a problem. They're not going to be able to tell you what's wrong. And what's going to happen is they're going to go into a what they call an autistic meltdown. The autistic meltdown looks like a typical child having a temper tantrum, but is definitely not for the same reasons. There's nothing you're going to do that's going to stop that meltdown. It's going to basically be time. What we do when this happens is we remove her from the situation and we just make sure that she's safe. And eventually the meltdown will stop and it's almost like it never happened when it's done. We'll talk more about that and how to help her out. When you get the autism spectrum disorder diagnosis, there are often a lot of things that come along with it. It's just not autism. And sometimes some of the things that come along with it are harder than the actual autism to deal with. That big blue bubble in the middle, autism spectrum disorder, and the smaller orange bubbles around are examples of different things that can come with it. People don't realize that there's an attention deficit disorder that comes quite frequently with autism. There's also obsessive compulsive disorder side to it. People often aren't surprised to see on the bottom left, the gifted part. When these kids take up something, say like Lily in music, it becomes their world. She really puts everything she has into her music. And that's, I think, where the gifted side comes. But it's not without work. She works very hard at it. Other things, depression. If you look at what you need to have an autism diagnosis, not being able to interact with peers can be really hard. And we see that a lot with Lily. She becomes depressed because of it, because she doesn't have a lot of friends and she doesn't have people that she, her age that she can do things with. So it can be really difficult. So remember, during this journey in autism, there are things on top of it that can play very difficult as well as the autism. The 5 categories of autism. Well, the good thing is that we don't go by this anymore because this is a lot of information on one slide. But why do I still talk about it? Well, if you were in EMS world, if you were to come into my house and say there was a situation with Lily, I might be a little disheveled in the situation. I might not be thinking clearly. So you ask me, what is Lily's past medical history? And I say she was diagnosed with Asperger's. Well, that's usually a pretty easy one. A lot of people understand that Asperger's is autism. But what happens if I say she has PDD? Would you really know what PDD was? Pervasive developmental disorder, or pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified? The answer is a lot of people don't know what it is. A lot of people don't know what Rett syndrome or CDD is. And that can become a real problem when taking a patient history, because if you don't know what PDD is, you're going to lose a major part of their medical history, going into the autism, and that can be really difficult. So what happens is I say Asperger's syndrome, just ask what it is. If you don't know, don't be afraid. Just ask what it is, and it's going to prompt me to be like, oh, autism, and that's what you need to know. With moving forward with that, a huge question that you could ask on entry into a house or your initial size up of what the call is. If I say that Lily has autism, you should ask 2 things. First, how does it impact her life? And that's going to give you a really good insight on how the call or the emergency or whatever reason you're there is going to go. Low impact, Lily is considered low impact autism. High impact autism are the severe cases. In the street, the problems you're going to arise are going to be 95% low impact autism. Everybody thinks, oh, it's low impact autism, it can't be that bad. False. All right. Low impact autism can be very, very difficult autism. The high impact autism are usually kids that have a one-on-one with them. They always have somebody, a guardian with them. That's why you're not going to deal very much with these people, because there's always somebody with them. But the low impact autism, these are the kids that eventually get their driver's licenses, they have jobs, they're on the street. But unfortunately, emergencies happen, tough things happen. And when something happens, their autism can really come out and play a really difficult role in their life, and really you can have a really difficult time during the emergency. So ask 1, how does it impact their life? Pretty easy question to remember. I'll tell you what the second question to ask is in a little bit. Some autism facts. Well, in the United States, about probably closer to 4 million people with ASD. 1 in 44 people are born today with ASD, and that is new as of a couple months ago, March 2022. The CDC really keeps track of how many cases are happening. ASD is growing about a rate probably closer to 20% now, and a new case of autism is diagnosed every 20 minutes. I'm going to ask a question. Looking at this slide, is this a good slide? Is this good information, or is this negative information? Anybody can answer. What are your thoughts? Do you have a good feeling about this slide, or is that kind of a sad slide?
I would think sad.
Yeah. You know what? It's kind of a trick question. I think sad as well. And the reason I think sad is because I look back at my high school years and I think of some kids that were probably not treated well, thought of as different, often probably using the R word to describe them. They just didn't have it easy. And I think, wow, those kids probably, or some of them, I should say, not all, but some of them probably had autism. But the diagnosis process back, 25, 30 years ago wasn't what it is today. I look at it on the contrary. Somebody just said sad, but good to know. It makes me wonder if people were undiagnosed. Absolutely, Rose. Absolutely. A good point. I look at it as also a good slide because it means that more people are getting diagnosed. More healthcare workers are going into autism as their specialty. And that's a really good thing. More family members see something, say, in their child or their nephew or cousin, and they're able to say something to the parents of, hey, maybe things don't look as typical as they should. Maybe you should go for an autism diagnosis. I know if I had a family member, I wouldn't think twice about saying something if I thought maybe their child was autistic, because once you get that diagnosis, there are tons of resources out there that are going to help them and bring them to their potential. It's going to bring their potential out. And missed opportunities can haunt you. So good slide. Autism knows no racial, ethnic boundaries. Anyone can have autism, but it does have socioeconomic boundaries. To get a diagnosis for anything, one, you have to have the financial means, and you have to have what? What do you need to have a diagnosis for anything nowadays? Or else you're going to go broke.
I mean, I'm assuming that you need insurance, a good doctor.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Time off from work.
Right. You need all those things. Going for a diagnosis of anything, absolutely. You need that insurance. You need that time. And if you come from a poor community, maybe you don't have the means to get insurance, and your child needs a diagnosis, it's going to be a lot harder to get that diagnosis. So I always say there is a socioeconomic boundary when it comes to diagnosis of autism. Like I said before, a lot harder to diagnose females, 4 times as prevalent as males. So it's a 5-to-1 ratio.
Looking it over. I think it's just the. I think she's got.
Oh, going back to your previous slide when you asked if it was a good or a bad thing.
Sure.
I was in the middle of typing and then I realized that it might come across as not cold, but kind of, less empathetic. But I would assume that, like, seeing those numbers, if you were the parent or a guardian or a loved one of somebody with autism, seeing those numbers would be kind of comforting in a way, because that there's more people out there and there's a lot of support. I know when I was growing up, my parents didn't really have the support that they probably should have had with my brother and I. So it probably gives them a lot more of a good background and a solid background to talk about.
Absolutely, Rose. That's a fantastic point. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. A couple of years ago, we trained Boston EMS, Boston Fire, and Boston EMS started tracking calls for us. And they were, at the time, they were doing about 300 emergencies a day. And they were tracking 1 call a day that had to do with autism. The main focus of the call was autism. So it is prevalent. There's a lot of prevalency there with the calls in autism. Just to give you a quick rundown of the prevalence, back in 2004, it was 166 diagnosed with autism. Now it's 144. So, Rose, like you said, that point, great point. Having more diagnoses of autism. I know even as a parent, when I see that number is getting down, it's good, because I see that more people are going to probably meet their get help and meet their goals in life, and that's wonderful. That's our main goal for Lily, is to meet her potential and let her do what she wants to do in life. This is an older slide, probably closer to 3,000 students in the state of Rhode Island with autism. Could even be more by now. Rhode Island falls kind of 1 in 104 kids with autism, kind of in the middle of what I have here. Is there anything you see above or below Rhode Island that kind of coincides with it?
I haven't figured that out.
Do you see any connections between the states above and below?
The states above Rhode Island and even Connecticut are more of the there's more people with more available jobs. Minnesota, obviously, there's a lot more farming communities, and there's probably not that many major hospitals or doctors' offices within a very short distance. So that doesn't really surprise me. I'm assuming that there's more,
Right.
but overall.
Right. That's another great point where that comes to my own theory on it. It is my theory. It's nothing set in stone, but I think it's a pretty good one. I look at if you live in the Minnesota area, if you live in the Midwest, and you have the need to get diagnosed with something, you have a disease, you have a disorder, and you need help. What do you do? Where do you go? Well, a lot of people say the Mayo Clinic. That's in the Midwest, but a lot of really fantastic hospitals are in the Northeast, or on the other side, Los Angeles area, California area. So people migrate to where the hospitals are, where the healthcare is, where the resources are. And we have a lot of really good resources and hospitals and healthcare when it comes to autism in the Northeast. So that's my theory, and I'm sticking with it. Moving on, there's no known causes of autism. I can have, people can try to argue with you all day about this, that, the other. There's really nothing set in stone. There's no hard evidence of any one thing being the cause of autism. What they actually think eventually is it's going to be a hereditary thing. But there's still no hard evidence yet that could give you that answer. How are we diagnosed with autism? Well, there's no medical blood test. What happens is it's an observation diagnosis. And what I mean by that is the
when they did the original paperwork, they messed up and said that she's gonna owe $834.
Sure.
There we go. So what happens is that these kids or adults that are going for the autism diagnosis sit in front of specialty people, psychologists, a doctor, anything, anything in that realm. And what they do is they communicate back and forth. The medical people are watching their behaviors. They're watching how they interact, how they do what they're asked, how they communicate. And after many hours, usually it's 6 to 8 hour, usually broken up into 2 days, observation test, you are given your diagnosis. In a couple weeks, you go back to the doctor's office and they present you your child or your own psychological evaluation, and the diagnoses are in the back. You have your primary diagnosis of autism, and you may have diagnosis of other things like I talked about before. When Lily was diagnosed, she has OCD, she has ADD, she has obviously some depression, and she has an extreme anxiety disorder that keeps her usually home-based about 99% of the time. She has a very difficult time leaving the home. We'll talk more about it. Like I said before, everybody is different with autism. It's, there are similarities, but the autism is usually what they have most in common. Sensory stimulation, all right? Sensory stimulation is one of the main things with autism, one of the main reasons that you're going to get calls for it. Loud noises, other sensory stimulation overwhelm these people. Sensory overload. That's when you get they're not able to communicate what's going on. They're not able to process what's happening fully, and the sensory overload happens. And quite often, Lily will go into a meltdown, and that meltdown, like I said before, is time. Also common for autism, inappropriate reactions to situations. A child on the street with autism sees a car accident or something happen in front of them and begins to laugh or begins to, hysterically cry. Just slightly inappropriate to probably what should be done. But this is very common. I often describe going into a scene of a young boy with an arm fracture, autistic, on the ground, and he's playing with his race cars on the ground. You pick him up and he begins to either laugh in your face or scream. You put him back down on the ground and he continues to go and play with his cars as if nothing happened. Very inappropriate reaction to what you would commonly think, would happen. This is a video of what they believe autism is like through the eyes of an autistic individual. This young man walks into a mall, and just like I said before, that 5-gallon bucket is dumped over his head, and you see how he reacts. One thing I want you to watch is the end, his facial expression at the end. That is what I believe, and what most people tell me their typical thought of what autism looks like, that flat facial effect. So I'll play this video for you. Are you able to hear this?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Six, 7, 8, 9.
Take my hand.
No, Alex. It's fine, isn't it? I'm not naughty. I'm autistic. And I just get too much information.
So you saw that boy's face at the end, kind of that flat facial effect.
Right.
Someone's there, but no one's home. So look, very typical with boys, not as typical with females. Next, how to recognize somebody with ASD. Well, that can be really difficult because I don't think ASD has a look besides that flat facial effect a lot of times seen on boys. But what do you pick out of this picture that might make you assume there's an issue?
The headphones.
Right, absolutely, the headphones. I always tell people I see two things in this picture, and I hope by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to pick out these two things. One, the headphones. Lily wore headphones for a long time. She's 14 now, going into high school, so wearing the headphones isn't, I guess, socially appropriate anymore for that. But she always has earbuds in, the music earbuds. She's always listening to music. When she's in school, they let her keep them in. It's not likely you will ever see her without the earbuds in. The second thing I see, and I'm going to talk very briefly about it now, but we're going to talk more about it later, is I see her t-shirt. She has a Stranger Things t-shirt, and at the time of this picture, Stranger Things TV show was really big with her. So I'm gonna tell you later on how you can use that Stranger Things, the t-shirt here, to help you with your interaction with her, to really use it to your advantage. So remember that t-shirt. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Some common speech patterns. Well, echolalia. Echolalia is basically they're repeating words over and over and over again. Why could this be dangerous? Well, when you're having, say, your EMS interview or whatever reason you're there, you're asking them questions and they're continuously answering the same thing. What happens if it's yes? What happens if the answer they're continuously saying is no? It might not coincide with what question you're asking them. So you got to be really careful about how listening to how they're answering you and picking up on the echolalia. Hey, they've said yes to 3 things in a row. Let me throw something at them that I know the answer wouldn't be yes, and see how they say it. Many people with ASD script. Scripting is really interesting. It's really kind of cool to see. Lily scripts those commercials in between the Judge Judy in the late afternoon, the law commercials. She knows every lawyer in the area, so don't mess with her. Someday she's gonna pick up the phone and dial that number. But she scripts quite frequently. She hears something, she scripts it back to you, say a week later. And sometimes you don't know what she's talking about. Other times you're like, wow, she remembered everything I said or everything she heard. This Lion King video here is just it's just a audio. It's of a young boy who has very limited speech, but when the Lion King comes on, he scripts the entire thing in character.
Hakuna Matata. What a wonderful phrase. Hakuna Matata. Ain't no passing craze.
Really cool to hear, but kind of sad that you know that in his normal everyday life, he has very limited speech and he's not able to communicate as well as he probably wants to. Many people with ASD are nonverbal. Do they have the ability to speak, or, you know, is this, it's really a mystery. I read an article the other day about a 15-year-old boy who started speaking for the first time. Interesting stuff. There's really no answer to that, but there is a lot of nonverbal kids out there. People with ASD, like I said before, that are verbal, they may have limited speech. Okay, limited speech meaning you ask them a question and they answer it with one word. I know a gentleman, you ask him, hey, where are you going on vacation this summer? And he answers bridge. What he means by bridge is he's going to Cape Cod for the summer. He thinks of the bridge when he thinks of Cape Cod. You ask him what he wants to drink. He's going to answer you all the time, juice. No matter what he wants to drink, the answer is always going to be juice. So that's the limited speech. Like I said, put kids with great speech, great communication in a hard, struggling environment, they're going to start to regress. The more stressful, the less likely you're going to get speech out of them. And communication is key. People with Asperger's syndrome. A lot of people think of, what movie do you think of when you think of Asperger's syndrome? Anybody?
Rain Man.
Rain Man, right. I always think of Rain Man when I think of Asperger's syndrome. Really cool movie. I don't think it's a great depiction of autism, but that's just me. Maybe somebody that was autistic would think it was a great depiction. I'm not sure. But Asperger's syndrome is probably the most well-known autism there is. They don't use Asperger's anymore, but Lily was diagnosed with Asperger's. They may seem more verbally sophisticated, but don't have the comprehension of what they're saying, okay? They're using big words, but don't typically know what they mean. Remember, we talked just a slide ago about echolalia. They're hearing a word, they use it frequently, okay? So that's where the comprehension versus the sophistication comes in. Their body language, okay? They're gonna appear to be poor listeners, especially the boys, okay? That flat facial effect, not gonna make eye contact with you. I'm telling you, they are very, very good listeners. They're listening to everything that you have to say, okay? Sure, they're not going to make very much eye contact with you, but Lily once told me, why do I want to look at somebody's eyeballs? It's kind of gross. I'm like, okay, that's great. That flat facial effect, just a very quick drawn summary of what that looks like. And this is the biggest one, difficulty interpreting your body language, okay? When you're entering a residence or an area with somebody that's autistic, you have to be very careful on how you present yourself, your body and your facial expression, okay? If you walk in, I walk into Lily's room every morning to wake her up. Before I walk into her room, I literally have to put on what I call my clown costume. It's this invisible little cloak I put over my head, and it turns my face happy. It makes my body relax, okay? I walk into her room to wake her up. I have a smile on my face. I'm relaxed. I sit on her desk chair. I easily wake her up. She sees that I'm smiling. It's a great way for her to wake up. If I went in her room feeling how I feel sometimes, my back hurts, my neck hurts, I just don't feel well, I want to go back to sleep, I probably have a, kind of a bitchy face on. I'm dragging myself into her room That's not going to be a real good way for her to wake up. Okay. She's going to read my body language as negative. Okay. A lot of times I'll walk into a room, and if I'm not aware of my facial expressions, she'll outright ask me, why are you mad? And I'm not mad at the time, but that's how she's interpreting it. Okay. Remember, she is a very visual person. She's looking at me. She's reading me before I say a word. And that's really, it's a difficult way sometimes to wake up, but it's what you have to do. When you enter the house, you enter the residence, be very, very aware of your facial and your body language. We talked about the inappropriate reactions before. Some body movements that they have. Well, a lot of these kids have unusual walking patterns. So it's another way that you can, may think autism if you see them outside. Hold on 1 second. Oh, interesting. We can definitely talk later on about that. May have the following: unusual walking patterns. Okay, another way you can tell maybe autism is present. A lot of kids walk on their tiptoes. A lot of kids walk on their side of their feet. Their gait is not usual. The unusual walking patterns could be a muscle tone issue. It could be hypotonia. Hypotonia really plays a part in emergency services when they're face down. If you have somebody that was born with hypotonia or floppy baby syndrome, muscle tone issues, and they're face down, chances are they're not able to raise their chest. They're not breathing. Okay, so be really aware of that. Get these kids over as quickly as possible. We talk to police a lot about meeting these kids out in the street and having a negative reaction where maybe they have to be cuffed up. Okay, people with ASD commit crimes. They do everything that me and you do. They just have the ASD, so they do have to be cuffed up behind them. Don't place them down on their stomachs once that happens. A couple years ago, there was a 17-year-old boy in a convenience store, and the convenience store owners knew him from the neighborhood. He started having a meltdown. They knew he was autistic, and they also knew his parents. They immediately called his parents to come get him, but they didn't answer. The meltdown started becoming more violent. They were forced to call the police. The police came, and they also knew of this boy from the neighborhood. They simply said, we're going to take him into custody, and we'll get a hold of the parents. The parents can come down and get him, but we'll keep him safe. So the violence started again. They had to cuff him behind his back, and they placed him on his chest in the back of the police car, drove him to the precinct, opened the back door, and he was deceased in the back of the car. He didn't try to move. He didn't yell out. He didn't try to reposition. He just died. You have to remember, a lot of people with ASD don't think like me and you. They don't, that common sense often doesn't play a part, okay? They often don't have the pain factor. They don't have the fear, the danger, the safety. That doesn't play a part in their daily lives. So be really aware of that. The repetitive actions. This is really great to see. It's called stimming, repetitive actions. You see the kids in the store clapping their hands, rocking, flapping their hands, or there are verbal stims they do too. If you see this, this means they're basically trying to comfort themselves. They might be having a hard time. They do this repetitive action, and it's often seen as self-comforting. You can have a discussion with them. You can do what you need to do with them while they're stimming. The only thing you want to watch out for is whether the stim, hurts them or somebody else. But if they're stimming, that's a great thing to see. For the first time tonight, introducing wandering. This is the #1 reason you're going to get a call that has to do with autism, is that they wander. They just walk away. Elopement. They elope from the home. There's a 60% sleep deprivation when it comes to parenting a child with autism because of that wandering and elopement. The parents aren't able to sleep because they don't know if the child is going to leave in the middle of the night. So we'll talk about that in the second part. So this is a video of the unusual walking pattern. You see how he walks on his tiptoes. Very, very common. All right, this is Teddy. This is a repetitive action or a stim. You hear that clicking sound that he's making. A lot of people assume that's his fingers clicking, but it's actually his wrists. I think that's right. This is Lily's, my daughter. This is her stim. This is a couple years ago, but it holds true today. As the earplugs in or the earbuds. I always laugh, Sophia looking like the Sony dog commercial. But that's her stim, very common. That is a very controlled rocking. In more stressful situations, that rock is going to be more on the violent side. She's going to be rocking coming down from her knees back. So it can be really difficult sometimes for her. Allow the person to stim, just keep stimming. What else are they hypersensitive to? Well, we have light, sounds, and smells we talked about, but there is hypersensitivity to touch. A lot of these kids have clothing options, not many clothing options. They, oh, great, Paul, I see what you're saying. Yeah, the hand flapping. When you see the hand flapping, yeah, it's excitement, a lot of excitement. Also, yeah, they're self-soothing, so it's really great to see. And the meltdowns, yeah, unfortunately the meltdowns play such a part in these kids' lives. It's really hard. Getting back to this, the touch, clothing, a lot of clothing issues. Lily doesn't wear jeans, mostly wears like the stretch pants or the wind pants. So said before, 99.9% of these kids live without the sense of pain, fear, danger, and safety. Okay, plays a major role in the elopements. The National Autism Society actually tracks water deaths with autism, and most of those are elopements. They walk away and they hunt for water. So it's so prevalent that they actually track the amount of water deaths a year. Fairfax County, Virginia, 11-year-old boy jumps in front of a fire truck. Well, this boy lived down the street from a fire station. Every time the truck would come by his house, he would run to the curb and jump up and down and wave. Well, overstimulated one day, the truck was coming. The last second, he jumps in front of the truck. The chauffeur was able to maneuver around him, but that's what happens a lot of times. What do they often, they say the, be aware of the unknown. The last second, this gentleman jumps. 14-year-old boy going to buy a bagel in New York City. Okay. Story goes, boy comes out of his house every morning, goes across the street to the bagel store, gets his bagel, comes back across the street and waits for the bus. He is autistic. One day he went across the street, got his bagel, come back across the street and was hit by a car, severe injuries. Everyone gets on, public safety gets on scene. That boy has severe trauma due to this, this motor vehicle accident. What is he concerned about? What is he talking about?
The bagel?
The bagel, absolutely. He's 100% concerned about the bagel and nothing else. They actually brought the bagel to the trauma center, and that was the thing that got him to cooperate. So they used what they knew at the time to help him cooperate. Absolutely, Tara. Highly attracted to water. I can't tell you. That's one thing in the next section we're going to go over is what to look for first. And water is always number one. Always number one. I often tell people, if you think of autism, think of water. And if you're looking for somebody with autism, you got to look for waterways, number one. How to best approach somebody with ASD. This is that second thing I said to talk about when you meet up with somebody, when you enter the house. You talk about how is the impact of the autism and how do I communicate with them? Communication is a lost art. We don't even think about it probably 90% of the time we're communicating with somebody. I came here tonight, I said hello, a couple of you said hello, we communicated. With autism, you have to know how you're going to communicate. You're going to have to think about it. Remember, some kids are great, other kids are in a stressful situation and they're going to regress. Other kids are nonverbal. Some kids don't, like I said, don't speak at all. A great way to communicate with these kids is using visuals. One way is a picture exchange communication system, or what they call a PEX card. This is a really simple PEX card here. You want to use PEX cards that are not busy, that are easy for them to look at, easy for them to point to answer your questions. Some of these kids, even a step higher, have these PEX cards on iPads. And I actually saw one this weekend with the Public Safety Special Needs Coalition. We had an event in Newport this weekend for kids to meet up with first responders. And a child had a iPad that he communicated with a PEX card system on it. So it was really interesting to see him talk to other people really fast. When they become proficient with it, they can talk to you almost in real time. Super cool. This is a quick video of a child learning how to use a PEX system. It takes him about a minute to get the sentence out, but when, like I said, when he becomes proficient, it's going to be super fast.
Okay, we're going to do more learning. Tell me what you want to work for.
I want red pudding.
Good boy. All right, we can have a red pudding.
So like I said, it takes him a minute to get it out, but that's his way he's going to communicate with the world. That's going to become his number one thing. And it's really cool to see if you see it in person. When talking to them, very calm, very simple language, be very literal, be very, very specific. If you're outside, no screaming. Let's not use slang words. Let's not use figures of speech. Very, very simple. To give you an example, one time Lily woke up in the morning and she had been to a summer camp a couple weeks prior, and they played games with them. And one of the games was a figure of speech game to see what they knew. She woke up. I said, Lil, how'd you sleep? And she said, like a log, figure of speech. I said, right, like a log, figure of speech. Fantastic. Drop the figure of speech part. But she got that at the time, but using other figures of speech, she often will just look at you like, what are you talking about? Like, she won't answer your question because she doesn't understand it. Extremely patient people are needed here. Be very, very patient. Like the cat at the mouse hole, you need to take your time with these kids, with these adults. If your average EMS call lasts 15, 20 minutes on scene before transport, these calls with autism are going to last 40, 45 minutes to an hour. Half of them is going to be building trust and confidence in each other, getting to know the person, getting to understand how to communicate with them a lot of times. If you find yourself losing your patience, getting frustrated, believe me, it happens. It happens with me a lot. I have to walk away. I have to take a break, take some space. If you find yourself feeling that way, don't be afraid to tap somebody else in, somebody else that's on the call, your partner, anybody. Hey, can you take over here for a minute? I need a minute. As a parent, if I see that, I'm going to think so much more of you than if you were to say, start getting angry with her or start yelling, start raising your voice, because that's not going to work with her. You need to stay patient, and that's the key. This young lady is asked, simple question, what is your address and phone number? She knows it. She's just not able to give it to you correctly. So you're going to have to ask a couple times. This is where patience comes in.
What's your address?
1274 Southwest 16th Avenue, Boca Raton, Florida 34586. 334-561-399-59451.
So that's your address and phone number, right?
So like I said, she knows it. She just doesn't express it well. It's too fast. You're going to have to ask her a couple times. Sit down, get in, wait here, stop. These are easy, short, clear phrases that they're going to understand. Some of these kids, like I said before, they're visual learners. So our organization has packets that we give out, and there's a lot of visuals in there. There's an actual stop sign. Everybody knows the universal red stop sign. So if you're having a conversation or you're interacting with somebody with autism and they're coming at you and they're going to run away, hold that stop sign up. Stop. They're going to react to it. They're going to stop. So some nonverbal use sign language. I haven't seen that very much, but it is definitely possible. Avoid touching, we talked about. Always be aware of the possibility of bolting. When on an EMS call, a lot of times you come with the ambulance or rescue and you have a fire truck that assists. When dealing with autism, you don't want 5 or 6 people in the house, especially if you have somebody that has the possibility of bolting. What I say is to have the ambulance or rescue staff come in, start dealing with the patient, dealing with the family, and the additional staff on scene, whether it be fire, police, you use geographic containment, okay? You have somebody stay back at the door, outside the door, make sure the person doesn't run. And then you put a couple other people maybe at the end of the driveway or at the end of the yard next to the street. So if the person does bolt or run away and they get past the door, there's still another layer of protection outside with the other individuals. So geographic containment. Stressful, upsetting situations. I can't emphasize this enough. It's going to affect them. They're not trying to give you a hard time. They're not trying to bust your chops. They're just having a hard time. I see Lily struggle in 75% of the things we ask her to do. Put her in a stressful situation. She almost is unable to do anything. So you might have to tie their shoes. You might have to help them with their jacket. Things that they're normally able to do, you might have to help. Numerous people with ASD suffer from psychological trauma. It's almost like a PTSD thing now, where kids that were diagnosed years ago with autism in the beginning of like the real uptick of diagnosis, people didn't understand, so they maybe weren't treated right on the outside in the outside world. They remember things, they remember incidents that happened. So when you're dealing with somebody with autism, I always just tell people, just be nice, do the best you can, and that's what's going to help out. So that is the first part of this. We're now going to get into the EMS fire section. If we want to take a 2-minute break, if you need to use the restroom or get a drink or something, now would be the time, and we will get going again in 1 second. Does anybody have any questions on that first part before we jump into the second portion?
I guess this way I don't have to type it all out. My dad was diagnosed with Asperger's about 3 years ago. And then, so my brother and I were both put in the ADHD section, but we didn't really have it. And the reason that they had such a problem with me was that, you know, girls show differently.
Right.
But now it's kind of too late for me to be, you know, determined, because I've had so many other things go on in my life that I have like PTSD, CPTSD. So so at this point, but my dad was both very relieved and very upset when he got his diagnosis entirely.
Sure, I can understand. Yeah.
Because, you know, back when he went to school, it was you went to a Catholic school, and if you didn't sit down when you were told to, you got beat. So he, you know, so he had a lot of PTSD from that.
Absolutely.
So it's, you know, that's why I said like it would be a lot more comforting for people to realize that there is an uptick. So
Right, absolutely. You're 100% right. And I think even like, you know, when you find out a diagnosis, I think on anything, it answers so many questions for you. And then you can like begin to figure out how to better yourself, and the resources that are out there, you can use them for your own advantage.
yeah, and like it certainly allowed us to see why our childhood was a lot more different than a lot of the other kids that I know, because my dad doesn't really have the emotional aspect of it.
Right.
So he's very smart, has like 3 or 4 master's degrees, like very smart, very kind, but he doesn't know how to express a lot of emotion. So
Right.
I've seen my dad cry exactly 4 times in my life.
Wow. Yeah. It's that lack of empathy. It doesn't mean it's not there. It just doesn't show.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to show it. And then
Right,
there's me who has an extreme amount of empathy, and I cry at everything. So he's like, well, it could be that, it could be, you know, X, Y, and Z. And the doctors are just like, you know what, just figure out how to handle yourself. So
easily said than done sometimes.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, so this is the autism fire to EMS portion of it. Going to go over some tricks. I hate saying tricks. I should say you know, I'm going to give you some things to put in your bag that you can use. It doesn't mean everything is going to work every time, and I'm especially not telling you to change your protocols because of this. You have to do what you have to do. These are just some ways to work with autism and get around the difficulties of it. And I always tell people there are some things that you are going to need to do that the autistic individual is just not going to tolerate. They're not going to let you do these things. When that happens, documentation is your best friend. So just document everything. If you're not able to do something, even if it's medically necessary, just document. You have to remember, pushing them and pushing them and pushing them to do something is going to be harder and harder and harder on you. So, and it's also not going to be good for them in the long run. So I have 3 or 4 case studies here. Texas 2003, fire started early in the morning, and Amanda's mom rushed to get her daughter out of the house. Amanda, teenager with ASD, wrestled her mom out of the window, and she remained inside the house where she died. Lawrence, Massachusetts in 2008, fire broke out in the home. Linda and her husband, George, made it out of the split entry home safely, but Sean, their 20-year-old son with ASD, was trapped inside. They could not coax him out of the home. Linda went back inside to get him. George tried to follow, but was pushed back by the smoke. Both Linda and Sean died. Arizona, a 12-year-old boy dies. April 2011, once the fire was under control, firefighters searched the scene and found the 12-year-old partially under the bed, deceased. Father told investigators the son evacuated with the family, but became confused and ran back inside the burning home. What do these 3 stories have in common? What is the common denominator?
They got confused. There was a lot of chaos going on. I mean, anybody who's been on a fire scene knows that there's chaos. There's a bunch of people running around. There's hoses everywhere. There's hot stuff. There's wet stuff. There's, you know, all sorts of stuff going on. And they felt safe in their house, even though it wasn't safe. You and I know this, and maybe they even knew it, but that was their safe spot.
Absolutely, 100%. You took the words out of my mouth. The change in routine. We talk about routines in autism. They go hand in hand. Just like Rose said, you're outside, you're watching your home burn, you're hearing the trucks, and you're a typical individual with no autism. It's going to be overstimulating. It's going to be hard for you to watch. Add that autism, add the not understanding what's happening. And just like Rose said, they are going to go where it's safe, and where it's safe is their home. On a scene where I often call controlled chaos, you know, to the fire department, everything is going as planned. To us, it looks like a disaster scene. I often say, situation like that, you get on scene, you find the family outside, and they say, you know, their son's having a meltdown, their son or daughter's having a meltdown. They say there's autism. Call for an additional ambulance or rescue, call for another police car, isolate the person, get them away from the scene into the back of a cruiser, into the back of an ambulance or rescue, and have the family sit there. They're out of the way, they're safe, they're isolated. And that's the best way to handle something like that. And also, climbing out of a window is not in anyone's routine, never mind the middle of the night, young child, somebody with autism. We teach them to stay away from windows, not to push on the screens. And now, 3 o'clock in the morning, we're asking them to climb out a window. It's just not typical. We ask parents and caregivers, what do we do to prevent tragedies like this in the community? Well, one thing I talk about, and I'm a huge advocate of, is meeting your special needs community. Going out and finding out who is special needs in your community, getting to know them, getting them to know you. How do you do that? Well, so many of our departments have special days where open houses, kids can come and see the fire department. One community you're not going to see at these events are a lot of special needs, especially autism. It's too much interaction, it's too much stimulation, and these kids' parents are not going to introduce them to a situation like this. What can you do differently? Well, have a sensory day. It's becoming, you're seeing more and more of these. Sensory days at the fire station, sensory days at the police station, sensory days at the EMS station. You control the environment to make it safe and approachable to them, okay? If anybody has any questions about how to properly do that, my organization that we've had numbers of them so far, and we've only had one minor incident that was taken care of immediately. So if anybody has any interest in having an open house at their fire department, their police department, EMS department, get in contact with me. I can give you great resources and plenty of information on how to do that. That is a great way to prevent disasters in your community. Know your special needs community. Often we will get on scene and we're going to have a parent or caregiver there that wants to tell you the life story of who you're about to meet, okay? With autism, I really, really want you to stop and listen to what the parent or caregiver has to say. Really take in what they're talking about. They're going to give you tips. They're going to tell you what not to do, what to do, how to keep the situation controlled. Listen to what they have to say, because really they're the experts in their kids, and they're going to give you some great information. ASD, more likely to have an encounter with somebody with ASD than the general population. What is that number one reason? Elopements. Elopements, number one. We often see our elderly community, especially nursing homes, wearing tracking devices or GPS devices because of Alzheimer's. You also see that a lot with autism now. Safety Net is just one company that the ALEC program talks about, but there are 4 or 5 companies out there that have these systems that parents can get to put on their kids. The problem is that there's the receiver end, and the departments need to have the receiver ends, but budgetary reasons, a lot of times these are not in there. They are expensive, but they do work. The tracking system on the left here goes on the child. They each have an individual tracking number. The child goes missing. 911 is called. My child is missing. Here's their safety net tracking number. And 911 will get a hold of the closest people with safety net. I know in Rhode Island, state police has safety net. There are a couple other companies that are used in Rhode Island. But like I said, expensive. There's a monthly fee for the person that has the watch fob on. So they're not all that easily accessible. There is grants out there for them, and there are ways to get them, but unfortunately, a lot of people can't afford them. Rhode Island also has a special needs registry, which is a great piece of information that I don't think is utilized enough for the people in Rhode Island. I really hope that you start looking into the special needs registry. It gives you a lot of information on who's in your district, in your town, your city, and what their special needs are. So I ask you to really get involved with it. There is some really pertinent information, especially when it comes to autism, that are going to be on these sheets. You have your everyday information, your contacts, your, whether they have ID jewelry, clothing tags, medical requirements. But when it comes to autism, like I said, elopements are number one, okay? You're going to be searching for these children or these young adults, and approach and de-escalation is vital. You need to know how to approach and how to de-escalate. Remember that t-shirt I talked about, that Stranger Things t-shirt in the beginning? This is going to play here, okay? Think about that for a second. What are these kids or the young adults' likes, dislikes, loves, and fears, topics of special interest, okay? These two things are number one on that sheet when it comes to elopements and looking for somebody with autism. Their likes, I should say their approach and de-escalation. If you find them out in the woods, say, and they're 100 yards in front of you and you start approaching, like most little kids, what are they going to do?
Run away.
They're going to run, right? They're going to run. They don't want to be, the fear of being in trouble, right? They don't know who you are. We teach our kids not to talk to strangers. You're approaching them, okay? De-escalating. How do you de-escalate this situation? Well, before you start searching, ask the parents or look on that special needs registry form. What are their likes and loves and topics of special interest? I spoke earlier about Lily's love of music, okay? She loves music. She's always listening to music. She's always talking about music, okay? She's had different likes and loves throughout her, 14 years, but music has always been one of the number one things. I would ask you to say, hey, talk to her about music. Ask her about this certain band or this certain band. I'd give you some of her favorite bands. So when you're approaching, you can use this to de-escalate. When she's thinking about running, you start talking about music. Hey, Lily, I heard you like music. What's your favorite band? Your mom said you like this band. What's your favorite song? You start engaging. She's going to hear that you're talking about her topic of special interest, okay? Her little ears are going to perk up, and she hopefully will start answering your questions, because every child likes talking about their loves and their likes. Somebody with autism, it's like threefold, okay? You start talking about their likes, they're not going to want to talk about anything else. So you're approaching, all of a sudden, you're there, you're with them. Now you can guide them out. You de-escalated the situation using a great approach technique, their likes and dislikes. In 2013, an 8-year-old boy in Twin Peaks, California, San Bernardino County, went missing. He was found about 1.5 miles away from his elementary school, 24 hours after he disappeared. Rescuers on scene said, "We can't find him. What is this kid like?" And the parents answered, Ozzy Osbourne and Alan Jackson. I have no idea how these two coincide, but for this young boy, they did. Sometimes autism is a mystery. But they started playing Ozzy Osbourne on their PA systems through their phones. And a little while later, he comes out looking for Ozzy. His special interest was heard. He went looking for it. That's how important these things are for these kids. Lily's special interest about 1.5 years ago was Bob Ross. She lived Bob Ross 24/7, okay? We got her a wig for it. She would watch the episode. She had posters. She had Bob Ross dolls, Bob Ross figurines. She loved everything about Bob Ross. If you were sitting at dinner with her and you were talking about, her school day, she didn't want to talk about her school day. She wanted to talk about Bob Ross all the time. Funny in the beginning, could get a little annoying, but this is how deep their special interests go. I want you to remember, special interests are huge. Back when Lily was at that park, she had the earphones on. She also had the Stranger Things t-shirt on. If she had left for some reason, and now there was a search scenario, you see that she's wearing a Stranger Things t-shirt. A lot of times these kids wear their favorite things. You see a kid with a Boston Red Sox hat, start talking about baseball. You really kind of have to use your imagination and use your mind when dealing with these kids. You have to be a really good detective. Oh, I got a question. How often do they seem to change their likes? Frequently or not really? Great question. I would say Lily has probably had 5 major likes in 10 years. She had Bob Ross, she had music, she had Harley Quinn, What else? I know there's a couple more. I just can't think off the top of my head, but those are the huge ones. They don't change very often. So there won't probably be a long list. The parents or caregivers are gonna know immediately when you ask what are their likes. And they're gonna know what you're gonna do with them, because we use this at our home. If Lily's having a hard time, I'll start talking about music with her. I'll start talking about, you know, the possibility of maybe seeing if her favorite bands are coming in concert. You know, it's something we use even at home. I call it, you know, a little Jedi mind trick. They're having a hard time, we talk about it. So great question. Emergency contact temporary tattoos. Okay, I have not seen them personally, but they do say these kids wear them. But like I said, I haven't seen them personally. I have seen medical alerts. We talk about other medical issues that these kids have. There is a seizure disorder, a Fragile X syndrome, they call it, where when the person is heightened, when the sensory stimulation is too much, not only do they have meltdowns, they go into a seizure. So huge seizure disorders with autism. There are other medical conditions with autism that you might need to know about. So having a medical alert's great. I laugh at this picture because there aren't a lot of great options, especially for the little kids. I think the bottom with the shoe, the tag on the shoe, is my favorite, but my least favorite is the tag on the shoe. If they leave the house, how do you know they have that pair of shoes on? Or if they leave the house and they are wearing it, they elope, they walk into the woods, they're looking for water, a lot of times those shoes are going to come off. So you might not have the information. This is where the special needs registry forms are so important, because it gives you all that really important information on these kids. We have copies of that here at my home. So if first responders come for some reason, say there is a search situation for Lily, we can give them this form. They don't have to worry about the form being given by their dispatch or whatever. We have copies of it here. Some rescue tips. There are going to be obstacles in the home with autism that just aren't typical. Not only are interior doors locked, but the exterior doors are locked. Gates are locked. There's locks on bedroom doors that might not be typical. There might be like a chain lock on the outside. Why is this? It's just another obstacle. It's more time for the parents to hear that the child is trying to leave, the child is trying to elope. Every obstacle is another minute the parents have to respond. So that's why there's so many different things you see at an autism home that aren't typical. You all carry the tools that you're able to use to get through. So I'm not worried about that. Windows can be barred, nailed, or locked. I've seen nails, I've seen locked windows, obviously. I personally haven't seen barred windows, but I do know somebody that was trying to get their landlord or somebody like that to put bars on the windows of their kids' windows on the higher floors. There are a lot of I don't know. There's a lot that you have to do. There has to be outside unlocking mechanisms and things like that for fire departments and stuff like that. It's just not putting bars on. But I personally haven't seen. My stepson has autism and epilepsy. We have a monitor in his room and locks everywhere. Absolutely, right? When we had our security system put in for our home, we had every window and every door had a chime to it. Absolutely, it's a must. Some windows are plexi and plexiglass, which you're going to have to cut through with a saw if you're going to get through it. You're just not going to be able to break these windows. Think of the fire scene. You're trying to get into a window to help somebody. This person has autism, and you're coming through their window with a saw. It's going to be extremely difficult for them to stay put. They're going to be melting down. Keep these things in the back of your head. Searches, especially fire searches. We all do the best we can. We all do our primary, our secondaries, searches, top notch. But with autism, I say if they can fit, search it. If they can't fit, search it anyways. I know a young boy, he's very thin, very small, and he's able to fit in between his parents' king size bed in the what do you call it? The box spring. You will not see a lump in the bed because of the boy's size. This is just someplace he likes to hide. They have incredibly difficult incredibly ingenious places to hide. Their searches just have to be extra. We talk so much about building rapport with these kids, building confidence in you, building trust in each other, and getting this call to go, but it takes time. There are times where you just have to leave. You've got to get this person out of the situation they're in. Quick way to move somebody with ASD is wrap them up in a blanket very quickly. Use a bed sheet, use a blanket. If you have a heavy coat, like a turnout coat, and it's a non-life safety situation for you, you can use that. Anything that can stop them from kicking and thrashing and punching at you, do. A couple people grab them and you're able to move them out of the situation. We call it Burrito Boy. This is Lewis. He goes to his uncle's house and he enjoys wrapping himself in a area rug. They like that feeling of constriction. Coming more and more popular are the weighted blankets. They're great. They feel good. These kids love them. We have 3 or 4 in the house. They like that feeling of constriction. In a tough situation, I could walk behind Lily and wrap my arms around her in a big bear hug, and I can feel her body kind of give. You know, I'm not telling you to do that, but I'm saying, think of that when you get them on the stretcher. Using their own weighted blanket for comfort is great. Rescuing from heights. This can be just as difficult as a search situation because now they're at a dangerous height and you have to get them down. Well, how can you do that? What easy way can you approach this person and de-escalate the situation when you're up there? What's a great way to approach somebody when you're trying to de-escalate the situation and they have autism?
Using what they like or don't, or using what they like.
Right, absolutely. Talk about their likes. Remember that. Always remember that. You start talking about their likes up there, okay? You're with somebody else. We ask that you try to get a towel ladder there or a bucket ladder there. Trying to bring them down a straight ladder is going to be difficult, especially if they decide to fight. Or if they decide to try to get away from you. It can be a danger to you. Your own safety is paramount. You get them in the bucket and they decide to fight, you're able to sit on them, get them down to the floor, and somebody else can bring you down. So know where your closest towel ladders are, and use that like to your advantage. So you get that call that you're waiting for. Somebody with autism has eloped. Where do you check first? Well, like I said 100 times already, I know sometimes I say it too much. Water is number one. Know your local waterways, know your ponds, your lakes, your streams. Check the backyard, check the neighbors' yards, check around the neighborhood for waterways. During the winter time, it is worth my child's life to rip that winter cover off that pool. That boy you saw wrapped up in the area rug, when he was younger, he was at his uncle's house and he left. He went missing from a family function. They went in the backyard, it sounds like a Rhode Islander. They went in the backyard and they found his shoe up near the cover of the winter cover of the pool, and they lifted it off and he was floating underneath, treading water. They're attracted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to water. So check those, number one. I can't say that enough. The other places you check. Well, think about the places that they see every day. Their parents drive them by. Construction sites, drainage areas, train tracks. It's interesting to kids. It's places that we don't allow them to go, though. Check places like that, secondary. Especially after hours when no one is there. It's like their own little Disney World. Traffic, especially on a highway MVA or downtown somewhere like that. You have a child that is in traffic. Remember, they don't have that safety or danger side of them. A lot of times these kids live in that fight or flight, I should say. Sorry about that. That fight or flight. So traffic, they just don't have the thought of the danger of it. Some EMS examination tips. Well, people with ASD are routine. We said that before. Adjusting their routine even slightly can be completely disruptive. When they get disrupted, they start getting upset. They start having those meltdowns. Once they hit that meltdown, it's kind of game over until they come out of it. Remember, you are never, as 911, going to be in that person's routine. Somebody actually said to me once, well, on Lily's routine board, that's pictured on the right here, a couple years ago, can you put 911 on it? Well, it sounds like a great idea, but it's not going to work. When she has something to do, she has an appointment this Thursday. Well, we had to tell her the beginning of the week to expect an appointment Thursday, and it's written on her routine board, so she's able to see it every day under her daily stuff. If we weren't to tell her that she has an appointment on Thursday and Thursday came, it would be extremely difficult to get her out of the house to go because her routine is going to be disrupted. When you're on scene, try to remember that I'm entering an area that this kid is not going to like. If a parent or caregiver is present, always allow them to get involved. Have them ask the child the questions, or the person with ASD the questions. It's going to better the likelihood you're going to get the information that you need. And it says here, ask the parent or caregiver what function level. No, don't ask them the function level. Ask them how they are impacted, how they're impacted by the autism. That's going to give that parent almost a sigh of relief, because when you ask that question, now they know that you have some sort of understanding about what you're about to walk into. It can be very, very difficult for the parent as well as, the child that the actual call is for. A lot of times you're going to get calls to go to houses for a child out of control. The child's having a meltdown. You're going to get there and you're going to see that there's one parent home. They have multiple kids in the house. The parent's going to say, this is the third meltdown we've had in the last 3 hours. I just need the child to go, I just need the child transported to the hospital. When you really think about it, it's not the call for the child that you're going to. The parent is at their wit's end. We always say, if a child is diagnosed with autism and they have meltdowns on a regular basis, do they all the time need to go to the hospital when the parent has just come to their wit's end? Personally, I say no. They're doing what kids with autism do. They have the occasional meltdown. Sometimes the meltdowns are every day. Sometimes there's a few a week. But when you get into a situation like that, if you think about it, sit down with the parent, get them a coffee, get them a glass of water, have somebody check on the child, talk to the parent, let them take a couple breaths, let them refigure what they're asking you to do. A lot of times, 15, 20 minutes later, the parent is going to have their mojo back, and they're going to be able to control their environment again. And the child is not going to be needed to transport. So when you go into these situations, really look at the whole picture. Don't presume nonverbal kids do not understand what you're saying, do not understand, you're explaining what needs to be done. These kids listen to everything. They understand everything you're saying. If you need to have a conversation about the child's diagnosis and it needs to be a little bit more in depth, you're going to be talking about the child, maybe grab the caregiver or the parent and take a couple steps away and talk privately. I know Lily does not like being talked about in front of her. If we're talking about her diagnosis to someone and she's there, she becomes extremely uncomfortable. In that, when she gets uncomfortable, that's when we need to worry about the overstimulation and then the meltdowns. Always expect the unexpected with these kids. The bolting, we talked about the geographic containment outside, the bolting. If you get the kid to really trust you, this is where you want to really start moving that call along. Time is of the essence. After a little while, that kid might not want anything to do with you again. So always expect the unexpected. We always explain, even to typical people, what we're going to do before we do it. Short stories are great for autism. Basic information about what's about to happen, even using your partner or the parent or caregiver as a kind of a dummy to like this. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do a blood pressure on dad, and then we can do it on you, and you can see how it's not going to hurt. When performing your exams, move slowly, distal to proximal to where you're going, okay? So if you have a child that's having difficulty breathing, maybe an asthmatic, you're going to want to listen to chest sounds, obviously. maybe start at the foot, as crazy as it sounds. Start at the foot. Okay, your foot's good, your leg's good, your knee's good, your hip's good, your abdomen's good. All of a sudden, now you're at the chest and they've seen you've made it to where it hurts and you haven't hurt them. This is great. You made it to where now you can listen to chest sounds and they're probably not going to give you much of a problem about it. We said before, calm, simple language, give plenty of time, and be prepared to repeat your questions. When you ask these kids questions, they process the question one word at a time. So if you ask them what's the reason you're there today, they're going to start processing that. What's the reason they're there today? Now, it's taking them 5, 6, 7 seconds to answer you. You're most likely going to ask the question again. It's just human instinct. Well, when you ask that question again, if they're already processing your first question, you just shot them right back to processing it from the beginning again. Plenty of time, 3 to 10, maybe even 15 seconds on kids that are highly agitated or highly stimulated. Pen and paper is a great way to communicate with anybody that's nonverbal. Draw a picture of a stick figure, have them point out. Maybe they'll want to write on the pad what's going on. And then another picture of that picture exchange system. That is a really simple looking one with the mad, happy, sad faces. It's not very busy. It's easily to understand. Quiet spots. Perform your exams in quiet spots. Well, I wish it was that easy. A lot of times you're not able to perform your exam in a quiet spot. So you do the best you can. We talked about demonstrating on somebody other than them. And then the emphasization of comfort and reassurance repeatedly, okay? Even if if you don't think they're paying attention to you, they're not making eye contact, they're kind of looking away. They don't answer you when you're emphasizing comfort and reassurance. They still are processing it and they still like it. Everybody likes to be comforted and reassured, especially somebody with autism. Behavior when sick or injured, okay? Sometimes a person with ASD does not respond typically to pain or physical injury. Like I talked about earlier, that kid with the car, with the broken hand, with the broken arm. You picked him up, he flipped out. When you put him down, it was like the broken arm wasn't there and he continued playing with his cars. Instead of crying or running to a parent when injured, they may continue their activities that resulted in the injury. They're not processing it as that was the reason they're injured. A change in the mood may be the only indicator that an injury has occurred. This is where we say red flags are. If a parent of somebody with autism meets you at the door, and like I said, you listen to what they have to say. If they tell you something is a red flag, take it for what it is. It is a red flag. Parents report a decrease in self-injurious behavior. This child wakes up in the morning and they're off the wall. But today, they woke up and they walked to the couch, they laid down on the couch and they've been quiet for an hour. This is a red flag to a parent with autism. These kids, like I said, do the same thing over and over each day. So when Lily is sick, it's usually not until day 2 or 3 that we actually realize she's sick. Even some small injuries, she's able to hide and we don't realize. I'll say, Lil, where did you get that cut on your arm? Oh, that was the other day, something happened. But she doesn't tell us about it. She doesn't complain about it. But we see something is happening with her mood. We see something's happening with her daily routine that's different, and she's the one that changed it. We know that's a red flag. I kind of talk a lot about this because I want you to know that if a family member of somebody with autism throws that red flag card out to you, really take it for what it's worth. Some helpful hints. A lot of times we respond lights and sirens to houses. Well, these kids have sensitivity to sounds. If you're going to number 1 Main Street, maybe park down at 3 or 4 Main Street. Keep away from the house, kill the lights, kill the sirens before you actually get on scene. Don't keep big diesel trucks running outside their home because you don't want to really set them off with the overstimulation before you even get to them. Have a plan. Oh, we're going to this house. We know there's somebody with autism there. Park at number 3 instead of in front of the house. We don't like to turn our trucks off, so it's a good way to keep away from the house. We talked about not responding to directives, and it's obviously, again, we're just reiterating that a lot of these kids are scared. The fact that they're scared is the only thing they're worried about. They're not able to process language. They're not able to understand what you're asking them, and they just need help. This happens quite a bit in our house. If Lily is really upset about something, I'm sitting there on the floor tying her shoes, or I'm picking out what she's going to wear that day. She is a huge visual learner. So a lot of times we have visuals that are all over our house. We have visual in the kitchen on how to make a sandwich, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. There's another visual in her shower, and it basically tells A to Z how to take a shower. If she yells out to us, I can't do it, we just say, Lil, look at number 1. And she'll just use the visual and she'll get through it. So that's another way. Visuals are huge. We talked about trying to avoid touching them. Some of these kids wear lanyards that have information on them in big block letters, what to do. So you can look for those. So you've made it to almost transporting, and you're doing a great job. You probably come a long way in the last 45 minutes. We don't use backboards, I know, in this state, Rhode Island, anymore, which is fantastic, but we do still use C-collars and serve-go restraints. So how are you going to get a C-collar on somebody with autism? The answer is you're not, okay? If you do, send me a picture, I'll blur out the face and I'll put you next to this young lad up here that's on a backboard. It's probably not going to happen. They're not going to build enough trust in that short amount of time to understand that this really uncomfortable choking thing is going to go around their neck. So what do you do when they don't allow you to do it? Document. One thing we have to do, though, is that 5-point restraint system on our stretchers. A great way to get them onto the stretcher and get them restrained is as follows. Take all the restraints, unbuckle them, put a big white sheet over the entire stretcher so they can't even see the buckles. You have them come over, they sit down, they put their legs up, someone is standing at their head, and what do you engage them with? What do you talk about? We've talked about it a bunch of times tonight. Their special interest. Talk about their special interest. Engage them with that. While you're doing that, somebody else has another white sheet around their neck area, kind of folded up so they can't see, the stretcher. You quickly start buckling as you're talking about their special interest. That other white sheet is brought down over the buckles. And then on top of that, when you're done, a big heavy blanket, or maybe even one of their own weighted blankets. Now they have that constrictive feeling. They don't know they're strapped in. They don't know they're buckled in, and you're able to load into the truck and transport. Just a quick tip. Talked about hypotonia. This is just a picture of it. Floppy baby syndrome. This is a picture at birth. All kids fixate on objects, right? Especially younger kids. If they fixate on an object, you're able to show them the fire truck, the ambulance. Do it if you feel comfortable with it. Personal protective gear, a helmet, reflective tape, whatever they want to see, that's going to help you move along. We have what we call sensory bags, which are full with fidgets and things like that. Our coalition just distributed 150 over the Rhode Island. These bags are full with things that you can use during these heightened times when you have a situation with autism, the person is heightened. They have this bag full of fidgets, full of communication equipment, pillows that have the sequins on them. They love this stuff. So you can use stuff like that to kind of help them along. Seatbelt covers are another big thing that's happening on person sitting in the back seat. They have a seatbelt cover, special needs, may resist help, may not recognize danger, at risk of wandering. It's giving you basic information on who is sitting in this seat. When I tell people, when you see these, check the glove box, check the center console for an envelope with the kid's name on it. It might say autism on it, and it'll give you even more in-depth information on what this kid's special needs are. Stickers on the windows, you are going to see them. I'm not a big fan of them, but you are going to see more and more of them. I don't think I want people knowing who's in my car. I think the seatbelt cover works better for my family, but you're going to see those. I'm going to be your best asset at an MVA because I'm going to be driving. But if I'm through the windshield, I'm not going to be an asset at all. So this is where those seatbelt covers and hopefully that other information in the car comes into play. Echolalia. Remember I talked about the yes to all questions. Remember that. When you're asking this child questions about what's going on, how they're feeling, yes, or on the contrary, no could be used. It doesn't mean they're answering the questions correctly. C-spines will be difficult, impossible. Best friend the patient, befriend the patient, that's obvious. And bolt risk. You pull up on scene to an MVA and the child has self-extricated from the car or the vehicle, get them into the back of a truck, get them in the back of a police car sitting with somebody else, get them isolated so now you don't have a search situation when they decide to bolt. A MVA scene can be just as dramatic to these kids as a fire scene or something on those lines. Yep, just like this says, sensory issues, breaking glass, things like that can really set these kids off. So be aware of where they are and that they're contained. When you communicate to the hospital, ask for a quiet, isolated room away from the general population of the hospital. Give these kids the benefit of the doubt, get them away, get them in a quiet area. We ask you to do one last thing before you leave. If you come to this far, you have done a fantastic job on getting a child with ASD to the hospital. It's probably going to be one of the hardest calls you've had. But we ask you to stay an extra 5 minutes with the child, especially if I, as the parent or the caregiver, aren't there. Give the nurses, give the doctors, the other medical staff time to come in and get acquainted with the child, get comfortable with the child. 10 minutes goes by. Now it's time for you to leave. This could be hard because now you're going to want to go up and give a high five. We ask you not to. We say, just back out of the room, close the curtain, close the door, and leave, knowing that you did a fantastic job for the child and the family. Going up to them saying bye can be really, really difficult for them when they know you're leaving. So kind of like the disappearing act is better. Facilitating steps during transport, we like to keep it quiet. So your monitors, your vent systems, we're going to want to keep them as low as possible. Rhode Island, along with probably every other state in the country, are mandatory reporting states. We talk about this because you're going to see things in an autism household that just are going to be questionable. You're not going to understand why. I guarantee you that everything in an autism household has to do with this, with the child's safety. A person may present behaviors that are dangerous and they don't have furniture that are accessible to them in their bedrooms. There's just a mattress, there's just a bed. There's nothing on the wall, there's no window fixtures. We talked about that feeling of comfort with that compression feeling of comfort. That also goes with the head. They wedge their heads between things because they like the feeling of the pressure. You're not going to want somebody wedging their head between a bureau and a wall. You're not going to want somebody climbing that, you know, has behaviors that are dangerous, like climbing, throwing when they're agitated. So you get to a house and you see just a bed on the floor, nothing else. Ask a question. Why is that? Most of the time, they're going to tell you exactly why. Sometimes you might see a bed with no bedding on it. Why is that? Well, Lily was incontinent until about 10 years old. So what we did was every morning we would take her sheets off, throw them in the wash, and then when she got home, we'd have a bed making class. We'd show her from every part of how to make a bed. But you get there before that and see that there's no sheets on her bed. Ask, okay? There are other destructive behaviors that will be seen. One really difficult behavior is pica, or eating non-food items. This is especially dangerous when you are there as EMS or fire or police, when you get down to their level and you start unwrapping things that you need to use, whether it be IV supplies, bandages, things like that. You have to be really careful, especially when you get them in the truck for transport, that there's nothing out in the open that they can grab. They grab and just swallow things incredibly large. So it is, if you think that they won't be able to do it, think again. Swallowing non-food items can be dangerous for obvious reasons, right? So be really aware of that. Another thing is feces smearing, especially in the younger kids. I knew of a little girl who would not use the bathroom when her parents were with her. She refused to go. So the parents would have to leave. She would go in the bathroom, do her business, but she would feces smear at the same time. This is another very real thing that happens with younger kids with autism. When you get on scene, the best way, if you have to move the child for some reason you were called, wrap them up in a blanket or wrap them up in a sheet, and they're easily movable, and it's not going to be a mess for you. Be aware that the parents at the same time are probably going to be embarrassed. So take it easy on them as well. Before we talked about those community days, this is a picture of one of the community days that were done. Just a stretcher cot is out and they were giving the grandmother a ride on it. It's showing those kids that you care. It's showing the parents especially that you care about their kids and that you want to know more about them. So it's huge. Some departments are doing patches for autism. I think it's great. I have a collection of them. And it's just another supportive measure that as public first responders, that you go above and beyond your call to duty. So as a parent, I appreciate that. As a parent and a first responder, I also appreciate you listening to me tonight talk about autism. And I am easily available anytime that you want to get a hold of me. If you have a question, concern, you want to have a safety day at your department, I am always available to answer questions and help out. So with that, if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to spend some time talking to you.
You said y'all do presentations in Connecticut, right?
We do, yes.
Do you come to Norwich?
I would, absolutely. Yeah, if you, what I'll do is I'm going to put my email here. I'll type my email. And if you want to have presentations for your departments, individual departments, I'll be happy to set something up for you.
Thank you. I'm not in charge of that, but I just sent my HR department an email because I think it's super important, like especially now with COVID kind of quote unquote relaxing the standards. Right. So
right.
I think it'll be more of a because you see the touch a truck things and they're super loud and there's lots of people and
right.
Like even I get sensory overloaded and I'm fairly decent at like controlling my inhibitions usually.
Right. So. Right. Absolutely. Thanks. Frank, you asked a question. Have I heard of any states putting ASD on ID or driver licenses? There are some states. I know a state, one of the cities in Rhode Island, Cranston, Rhode Island, is making IDs for kids or adults with autism that they could present in the need. I did speak to an officer about having something like that put on a driver's license. But if you look at a driver's license, a lot of times it's really, he explained it to me this way. If you look at a driver's license, it's really busy. A lot of times if it says your hair color, your weight, and that you wear glasses, the officer never ever looks at that. And the chances of them seeing ASD on that license plate, I mean, on that driver's license, he said is pretty low. What we are working on and what is happening in some states is called the Yellow Sticker Initiative. And it's a yellow circle sticker that is placed next to the driver's, the license plate of the car. And that is a key that there's somebody in that car with a special need and to check the glove box or check the center console for information. But people are actively working on how to present ASD to first responders, kind of on the down low, like a driver's license or something like that. So great question though. Thank you. I appreciate all the comments. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's incredibly important for this information to get out. I have a nephew who is autistic, and everything that you said just rings true, and I learned quite a bit. So I appreciate everything that you did today.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming tonight. I appreciate Dr. Jardine, Catherine, allowing me to present to you tonight. As a parent, as a first responder, it's super important to me as well. All right, so if there's no other questions, thank you very much again for having me tonight. And you can definitely contact me at any time.
Did you put your email down?
I did, yes. I'll put it again. Just in
sorry, there's a lot of chats going on, so I'm trying to trying to read, pay attention to you, pay attention to everything else.
No problem. No problem. Oh.